Yeah, and that talking about Saudi Arabia, this raises the question of what Iran is capable of or will decide to do. Because as you say, what one place that would be quite vulnerable to the still pretty formidable Iranian military would be this Saudi oil shipping and oil refining capacity. And so if you wanted to just create a lot of chaos and maybe screw up the U.S. economy right as the election gets going, you could just sort of take that out or just massively disrupt it with a relatively cheap attack, right? But what else could they do?
I mean, there's almost too many possibilities to talk about. I mean, that you could do some kind of a kinetic attack that disrupts Saudi oil operations or just disrupts oil shipping in the Persian Gulf, which is very vulnerable. I mean, the tankers that come in and out of the Persian Gulf have to pass through a strait that's like 20 miles wide. Would not be a difficult thing to interrupt. But there's a wide range of options. As long as there are U.S. personnel in Iraq, the militias, the Iraqi militias who are independently outraged about Soleimani because he was their sort of patron and supporter, but also, do to some degree take not marching orders, but take sort of general guidelines, at least, from the Iranian government. They could attack U.S. interests in Iraq. Hezbollah could attack U.S. interests in Lebanon or attack Israel. You could see kidnappings. You could see Iranian attempts at sort of targeted assassinations of U.S. personnel. One of the things that's been talked about is cyber attacks. That's certainly another way that the Iranians, and I don't know, the assessments in Western media have been very, kind of hair on fire about Iran's cyber capabilities. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's certainly another way that they could try to exact some retaliation. So there's a wide range. I mean, there's a huge range. They could also get in. They could also do something in Afghanistan. Iran has been involved heavily in Afghanistan. Initially backing the Northern Alliance against the Taliban, but increasingly over the last few years, they've developed a relationship with the Taliban. So they could get involved. They could do something in Afghanistan. There's a lot of things, a lot of steps that they could take. Now, I think my guess would be that whatever they do will be calibrated not to be sort of the first shots of a war, to be an immediate kind of cause to start a shooting war. They'll do something that's proportionate and then wait to see how the U.S. responds to that.
Yeah, which reminds us that the real threat is us, because we're the ones with, right? Like, so the real threat is that we did something that will make them do something that will justify us doing something worse, essentially, and killing a lot more people by actually what? Like, what's the worst case scenario that could be triggered with the domino effect here?
I mean, at the end of the road is a war. It's a
like ground war, right? Like
war.
Actually
now,
we invade the country.
Ground war. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where the U.S. would fight that war from anymore if it's completely kind of wrecked its status with the Iraqi government. I don't know where the U.S. would station soldiers. You could have some, I guess, landings and amphibious invasions in southern Iran or something like that. But that's the ultimate outcome here. And if things really go totally off the rails, is a war. Short of that, you could see U.S. airstrikes and that, but it all kind of builds to the same thing, because if the U.S. Tries to, really escalate to a full on kind of air campaign against Iran, then the Iranian military is going to have to respond to that, and it just spirals further toward the full-fledged war. I think there's still plenty of opportunity at this point for both countries to kind of take an off ramp and put an end to this kind of escalation that we've seen over the last year or so. But it would require, above all, it would require some humility and some compromise from a U.S. government that has shown no inclination toward any of those things. It would require, for example, I think, an acknowledgement that even as, you see Mike Pompeo and all these other people from the administration and, in Congress sort of decrying what a destabilizing force Qasem Soleimani was in the Middle East for his entire career, would require acknowledging that nobody has destabilized the Middle East more than the United States. Like that's our thing. We've done it over and over again in a way that no other country could even imagine doing, really. So would require reflection and sort of self examination that I'm not sure. I know this administration is incapable of doing something like that, and I'm not sure that the U.S. government, no matter who's in charge, is capable of doing something like that. So I don't know. I don't think. The Iranians don't want a conflict. Iran's allies don't want a conflict. U.S. allies don't want a war. They would like to see, like the U.S., they would like to see regime change in Iran, but they certainly don't want to see a war in the region. I don't think Donald Trump wants to see a war somewhere in the back of his, vestigial brain. He understands that would be bad for him politically. But he's surrounded by a lot of people who wouldn't mind a war, and he's not really, intellectually capable of kind of refuting them when they push his buttons, which I think at this point they probably know how to do pretty well.
That's the end of the preview, folks. If you want to hear the whole episode, you can go to patreon.com/leftanchor. Thanks for listening.